Hey YouTube, this is Steve from Average Joe's Fantasy Football, and we've got your Week 4 waiver wire video to help you guys out with your fantasy season. We had some great games on Monday night. Of course, we had a great slate of games over the weekend, and of course, some really good performances and some that were outstanding over the weekend. So hopefully you guys came out with victorious. And again, we're going to jump right into that Week 4 waiver wire video. So week 5 is just about here. We've got a Thursday night game and then of course games on this weekend. No buys yet, but we're getting closer, which means obviously there's gonna be some crazy waivers that are coming up, but there's still some really good ones for week 4. And I want to mention some great players that should help you out this upcoming week, or again, maybe some players you want to stash if you're in deeper leagues to kind of take away from your league mates to help you guys out for this fantasy season. Now, the first player I'm going to mention is going to be Andy Dalton for the Carolina Panthers. He's going against the Bengals this week, and of course, he's only rostered in 4% of leagues. Makes sense, right? But what a game for Andy Dalton. He comes in replacing Bryce Young, who unfortunately had not had success for the Carolina Panthers. And nobody really expected much out of Andy Dalton, right? This is the Carolina Panthers we're talking about. The defense isn't great. The offense isn't great. But man, Dalton ends up having over 24 points in fantasy with over 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, if you're in a deeper league, it totally makes sense grabbing Andy Dalton. Or if you're in a super flex, totally makes sense grabbing Andy Dalton. Now, I'm not saying you should grab him right now and replace your starter, but I do think he's mentioned here because I think his value could be stronger. I think you can see how well he showed up in that offense. Now, of course, anytime there's game time and teams have a little bit more preparation and preparedness for it, that's going to change. They are going to lose, Adam Thielen for a little bit. We'll see who steps into that second wide receiver role behind Deontay Johnson, but Deontay Johnson finally had an amazing game. So I do like that. But again, I want to mention Andy Dalton because he may be somebody that might help you get a win here or there, depending on what kind of matchups they have. Now, another quarterback I'm going to mention is going to be Daniel Jones. Now, he's only rostered in 6% of leagues. He's going against the Cowboys on the Thursday night game. And it's crazy to say this, but Daniel Jones has been pretty consistent in fantasy the last 2 weeks. That same thing could be said about the connection between him and Malik Nabers. Having an elite receiver like Malik Nabers has truly helped Daniel Jones, and it's really showing. Right now, Jones has thrown 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games, 0 turnovers, and now faces a mentally and physically defeated Dallas Cowboys defense. So I'm curious how this is going to play out, but I do think Daniel Jones deserves a lot more credit. I think Daniel Jones has definitely been slept on because I understand he has not performed well consistently, but the last 2 weeks has looked really good for him, and I do think he's worth considering putting on your roster. Now, the last quarterback I'm going to mention is someone that absolutely needs to be rostered, but he's not, is Sam Darnold. He's available in 71% of leagues right now. Still, 71% of leagues he's available. He's going against the Packers this week. Darnold is currently quarterback 2 so far this season. Now, of course, there's going to be some updates with Josh Allen's performance, but as of right now, when I record this, Sam Darnold is QB2 only behind Lamar Jackson. Yeah, he is still only rostered in just about 30%. That's crazy to me. I know the name is turning some people off, and I understand folks are waiting for him to kind of have that bad game, and they're like, oh, no, we're back to Sam Darnold from the Jets. But I think he's really found something in Minnesota. Having Justin Jefferson, of course, is great. Can't wait till he gets Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson later this season. And I think right now, the truly big thing is Kevin O'Connell as his head coach, who used to be a quarterback, has been so beneficial. And right now in 3 games so far, Darnold has thrown 8 touchdowns, which is a leaguing stat. He's been fantastic this season, and yet he's still available. If you are not rostering him, explain to me in the comments why. Because unless you have a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson, like currently right now, Sam Darnold should be on your team. Now, jumping into the running back position, I only have Chuba Hubbard as my guy you should consider grabbing. He's available in about 51% of leagues. He's going against the Bengals this week, like I mentioned. I think Andy Dalton is a big thing at quarterback. I think it miraculously fixes Panthers' offensive woes, and Hubbard is the beneficiary of it. Hubbard had a great game with over 100 yards on the ground as well as over 50 yards in the air and a touchdown. Now, having a competent quarterback is a big deal. Having a quarterback that defenses actually have to play against allows Hubbard to not see loaded boxes, allows him to actually have a lot more running lanes and be a big factor in the receiving aspect too. I think Hubbard is a great add because, again, if Andy Dalton does have any of the consistency that we just saw in week 3, why can't Chuba Hubbard have similar success like he did in week 3? That's what he needs. You can't have a running back to have a team just know you're going to run the ball because they're not afraid of your quarterback. And I think makes a big deal. Now, again, I really wanted to kind of focus on Chuba Hubbard. Now, you could also talk about like Bucky Irving, who now considered getting more snaps. He is definitely more efficient than Rachaad White. And I've mentioned Bucky Irving earlier in this season. I didn't want to mention him again necessarily, but I had to bring him up because I do think Bucky Irving is well deserved of being possibly rostered. But I do think he's somebody, because of what he's been able to do, is someone I kind of had to mention. Now, jumping into the wide receiver spot, I've got Jauan Jennings versus the Patriots. He's available in 69% of leagues. Now, a lot of this waiver is not necessarily based off of what he just did in that crazy week 3 performance. Yes, Jennings had a career day and he had over 45 fantasy points, which probably won a lot of people this weekend, their league. But I also recommend him as a great grab because Deebo Samuel's still out. Jennings has been a safe play for Purdy right now. Brandon Ayuk is struggling. I'm not sure what's going on. I think probably most things, missing time in the offseason is a big factor. Then you got Kittle, who's dealing with injuries. Like, though the offensive weapons is becoming less and less for the 49ers. And Jauan Jennings is taking absolute advantage of it. I do think he should be rostered in a lot more leagues. I do think he has the chance to be I would say a flex play, maybe a wide receiver too, depending on like how, I guess you would say, deep your leagues are, or, you know, how many positions. But I do think he's worth the value add. I'm not saying he's your number one waiver wire. I don't think he's going to ever get close to what he just did this past weekend. And I know a lot of people can jump on that, but I do still think he has value and he should be on your roster. Another receiver I like this week is going to be DeAndre Hopkins versus the Dolphins. Now he's available in 44% of the leagues. Hopkins had a great week 3 with over 19 points and a touchdown. Now it's no surprise he's still available because, again, he has been dealing with injuries and he had an abysmal first 2 weeks, but a lot of that is just because they're easing him into the offense. Week 1, he only had 29 or 27% snap share. Week 2 and 3, he saw about 46, 47% snap share. So he's starting to slowly see some of that snap share, and that's only going to continue to grow. Part of it is, I think, when they get him ramped up to about 80 to 90%, I think his value is going to only get better. I think he is the better receiver than Calvin Ridley. He's got the connection that he has with Will Levis, which is a big advantage. So I do think he's going to be someone you should be considered grabbing. Now, you may want to stash him now because, again, it's starting to happen. They're starting to believe in his health, and he's starting to get more of an opportunity. So I do like him this week as well. And the last receiver I'm going to mention is Tutu Atwell versus the Rams versus the Bears. He's only rostered in 2% of leagues, which is completely understandable. Right now, we're trying to figure out the receiver carousel for the Rams, and it is going to be difficult to kind of determine. And it will be that way until we get Nacua and Kupp back. But of all the receivers, I think Tutu Atwell is probably the one that could emerge as the one receiver that has some success week in and week out. Atwell saw over 13 points and saw 5 targets. Now, I don't expect him to be the wide receiver at any point in fantasy. I do think he's a nice flex play. I do think he could be a wide receiver 3, depending on how deep your roster is. But I think of all the receivers between, Robinson and Whittington and obviously Atwell, I think Atwell's probably the one that's going to have the most success. So I do think he's worth a grab. Now, at the tight end position, I've got Cole Kmet for the Bears. He's available in 60% of leagues, and he's going against the Rams this week, who have been just demolished in the defensive side. What a game Cole Kmet had this weekend, too. He surprised me in week 3, which I thought was going to be a tough matchup for him. But I'm glad he surprised me. He's one of my favorite tight ends. And on top of that, it really showed that the Bears offense, what it could be like. Like this past weekend really showed a lot for me as far as how the Chicago Bears are going to be going forward. Now, there's no surprise he's available on waivers. Now, week 3, he did see 11 targets. And he took advantage. He had 10 receptions, 97 yards, and a touchdown. And I love the next 2 matchups for Cole Kmet. He's got some really good matchups. So he's definitely worth a grab, especially with all the injuries going on with the tight end position. You got Sam Laporta, who is most likely out, right? You've got Trey McBride, who might be out with a concussion. There's a lot of unfortunate injuries that, especially these stud receiver or tight ends. So again, I think Cole Kmet might be worth a grab. I'm also going to mention Brock Wright. I'm not going to really go into depth with him, but because of obviously the Sam Laporta news, I do think Brock Wright is a grab, because especially if you're trying to fill it in. I still think there's some other tight ends you can grab, and of course hit me up in the comments to help you out. But I do have to mention Brock Wright. I think he's still somebody you may want to consider grabbing. So that's my week 4 waiver wire video. Hopefully you guys have gotten a 3-0 start to your fantasy season. Of course, if you guys do not, hit me up in the comments. I'd love to help you guys out for your season so far. If you guys do have some questions or you're unsure who you should pick up or drop, let me know in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Hit that like button, and I'll check you guys out next time.